Hello, and welcome to ARTFul Insights. I'm Shane Farrell, the Digital Projects and Programs Manager for ARTZ Philadelphia, and together you and I are going to look at some art today. This video is produced in partnership between Dementia Society of America and ARTZ Philadelphia. Each month we offer a live program where a small group of people talk about a work of art or works of art from museums and cultural centers around the country. It's a different museum or cultural center each month, and in addition to that live program, we also produce a video like the one you're watching right now. We look at the same works of art as we did in the live group, but with the video it's 30 to 40 minutes in length. You can watch it anytime, day or night, that might suit you, and it's an opportunity to have a more intimate, self-driven conversation about the art. I'll ask a few questions to get us started, give you a few things to think about. I'll share some of the observations and thoughts that folks from the live group brought up that I think might be interesting for you to consider. But really, this video each month is about you. It's about what you see in these works of art, how you respond to them, and just having the opportunity to look at a work of art and think about it at your own pace. If you're watching this video with someone, please feel free to pause from time to time if you'd like, so that you can have your own conversation. If you're watching on your own, we're delighted to have you, and it'll be a conversation just between the two of us. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the museum or cultural center that we're visiting today. Welcome to ARTFul Insights. So here we are at the museum that we're going to be visiting today. This is the Sidney and Lois Eskenazi Museum at Indiana University. This museum was first founded in 1941 when the university decided that there should be a place for students to see exhibitions. This was not a kind of permanent collection space. There were traveling exhibitions that would come through the university. But in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they really started building a permanent collection. In 1962, they were given space in the Fine Arts building on campus, but they quickly outgrew that, so they started a project to have a standalone building in 1974. The architect I.M. Pei was hired to design the building. You may have heard his name before, and that's the building that we're looking at right now. It was completed in 1982. These days, the Eskenazi Museum has an extremely diverse collection of over 45,000 objects. They have a large collection of jewelry. They have a gallery devoted to time-based and new media, so film and art made with technology and those sorts of things. So they really have a very diverse approach beside just things you might typically associate with an art museum like painting. In 2016, Sidney and Lois Eskenazi gave a large gift to the university in order to renovate the museum building, and so that's why the museum has the name that it does today. So now that you've learned a little bit about this museum, why don't we go ahead and take a look at the work of art that we're going to be looking at today. So here is the artwork that we're going to be looking at today, and before I say anything about it, I just want you to take some time to look this over and just notice whatever is interesting to you in this painting. Follow your eye around and see what jumps out at you. What are the details you notice first? And after you look at those, what sort of things do you start noticing next? Just kind of let your eye guide you across this work of art And once you've had a little bit of time to look at it, we'll come back together and have a bit of a discussion about it. So now that you've had a chance to look this over a little bit, what were some of the first things that you noticed about this work of art? I would be very curious to hear what your first observations were. Well, one of the things that participants in our group discussion on Zoom noticed first was this large window right here, right kind of in the center of the painting. There's a really big window. And that starts to make us think about the sense of light in the painting. Is there something you notice in particular about the lighting in this painting? Well, someone in our group discussion said, the room is a very wide expanse and lots of light comes in. And we do kind of get that impression, don't we? There's a lot of open space. The space looks very bright. What is giving us the sense that this is a really bright space? Is it something about the way the artist is handling color? Is it something about the way the artist is handling value, how bright or dark something is? What do you think? What are you noticing in regards to the brightness of this space? Well, something that I notice is that there are a lot of lighter colors in this work, and there are a lot of warm colors in this work. So we see kind of ochre yellows, we see some reddish tones, even the brown tones in the painting feel kind of warm to me. Is there something in particular that you notice about the colors in this painting? And does it create a sense of warmth for you as well, or do you feel differently about it? Well, as we continued talking about the sense of brightness in this room, which we started by just noticing this window, and then we started to kind of look around and see, wow, it looks really bright everywhere in this room, is the reason why it might be bright. Is there something that you notice in particular in this artwork that makes you think, oh, that's why this is in a very bright, well-lit room? Well, in our group discussion, we noticed that this figure here is sitting in front of an easel. So this made some people wonder if this might be an artist's studio, because that's a space where you would want lots of bright light coming in, right? And lots of natural light too. If you've ever been in perhaps a building with artist studios in it, they try to build in a lot of natural light so that people who are painting or otherwise making artwork in the studios can really see what they're doing and get an accurate representation of the colors they might be putting on their painting. So we started to wonder if maybe this was someone's art studio. What do you think? Does this look like an artist's studio to you? Or does it look like something else? As we looked around the room, we kind of started to get mixed messages about that. People started noticing different small details around the room. Someone had noticed the drapery up here above the bed, and they wondered what that was for. I guess I should have said first, someone noticed the bed. There's a bed below this drapery. One of our participants wondered if this drapery was somehow used to kind of block out light when someone might be sleeping in this bed down here. Leaning up against the bed, we notice a guitar. So that kind of changes things as well, right? Someone might be playing music in this room. When you look at this room, is there a particular sound you might associate with it? Do you imagine this artist getting up from their easel and going to strum on their guitar? Or perhaps you just hear sounds of birds outside the windows. As we continued looking around the room, someone fixed on this artwork up here. Looks like some sort of painting might be hanging on the wall here. And then someone else pointed out below that this object here. We couldn't quite figure out what we thought it might be, but a lot of people seem to think that it might be a sculpture of some sort. And as we started looking around the room, we started noticing just more and more objects. There are more and more paintings. Perhaps they're paintings. Maybe you think there's something different. This looks like it might be a painting to me. But there are lots of things hanging on the walls that look kind of rectangular in the shape a painting might be. There's just lots of different objects scattered around this room, which can maybe tell us something about the person that this room belongs to. So someone in the group suggested maybe these are just things that the artist behind the easel likes to collect. So in addition to being an artist, he's also a collector, and there are just certain things he likes that he wants to have in his room. What do you think all the different objects around the room tell us about the person that this room might belong to? Another person had noticed in particular the rug on the ground in this room. So if we look here in this kind of bottom third of the painting, we notice that there's a rug of some sort here. And that person said, why would you have a rug like that if you were in an art studio? Wouldn't you get paint all over it? And that's kind of a good question, right? Art studios tend to be kind of dirty places. Paint gets everywhere, or whatever other medium the artists are using tends to kind of get all over the place. If you've ever painted yourself, maybe you've experienced this, that it's just hard to stay clean when you're making an artwork. Why is that rug there if we see a painter here and we think that this might be their studio. What do you think? Does that change the way you look at this painting? Well, maybe something else we can pay attention to in this artwork will tell us a little bit about that. So as we were looking around the room, in addition to the painter at the easel here, we notice there's a set of feet over in the corner here. Who do we think those feet might belong to? What do you think? Well, in our group discussion, people seem to think that that person is what the artist was painting. So if we look at the way this easel is angled, if we look at where the painter's gaze is pointing, all kind of points over toward this corner with these feet here. So perhaps this artist is painting a portrait of someone who's sitting off in this corner. So we have kind of a painting within a painting. So there's something kind of interesting going on there, isn't there? And maybe that changes the way we think both about this environment and about this artwork. So let's think about this a little bit. Something we talked about is whether or not this is an art studio. And now that we've noticed that someone is being painted here, maybe it's not an art studio. Perhaps it could be the home of the person who's being painted. And this artist is just traveling to their home to paint their portrait. This would be a kind of common thing if you were a patron of the arts in a certain era, to have an artist come to your home and paint you, and perhaps your family as well. That would be not a totally unusual thing. So maybe this isn't an art studio, maybe this is someone's home. What do you think? Do you think this is the artist's space and the artist's studio? Or do you think this space might belong to the person wearing the pair of shoes that we see off in the corner? But let's get back to talking about the subject of the painting within the painting. So we see just kind of enough of this figure here to let us know that they're there. But we can't see very much about them. We just see their feet, a little bit of their pants, and that's kind of it. So there's kind of something mysterious going on here. We see an artist probably painting a figure, but we don't really know anything about the figure other than their taste in shoes and pants. What do you think about that? What do you think this person who's being painted might be like? Why do we think the artist might be painting them? Kind of brings up a lot of unanswerable questions because we can't really see them very well. We only see a small part of their body, so we don't learn a lot about them. But it can be fun to ask these sorts of questions, right? It forces our imagination to go outside of just what the painting is showing us. So maybe that sense of mystery is kind of fun. We can imagine this person to be whatever kind of person we want. What do you think? What kind of person is this? And what's their relationship to the artist here? Is there anything that we can draw just from looking at the way they're holding their legs, looking at the types of shoes that they have on, can we learn anything about this person, or are they just kind of left mysterious to us? What do you think? Someone in the group discussion had mentioned that the shoes of the figure on the side of the painting here just looked a bit more modern to them than some of the other things in the room. So maybe there are small details that can kind of help us learn a little bit more about who this person might be. We can also just think about what kind of person has their portrait painted by an artist. Have you ever known anyone who's had their portrait painted? Or maybe you read about someone who had their portrait painted in a history book or even in fiction. What do you associate with people who get their portraits painted by artists? Is there a certain type of person, or could it just be anyone? Well, as we were thinking about the relationship between the painter and the person we think might be the subject of the painting, we started looking back at the painter a little bit more. So let's zoom in a little bit and just take a closer look at the person behind the easel here. So as we get up a little bit closer to this figure, what things do you start to notice? Is there something about this painter that you notice now that you hadn't noticed before? Well, one of the participants in our group on Zoom said, "Look, the painter has something in their mouth. Maybe it's a pipe." So maybe this is a painter who smokes a pipe. What does that tell us about the painter and about the room? Maybe it tells us a little bit about how the room smells. Maybe it smells like pipe tobacco. So as we continued looking at the artist here, we also noticed that their hands are folded in their lap, and they're maybe holding something there. What does this tell us about what's happening here? Their hands are just kind of folded together in their lap. Doesn't look like they're really actively doing anything, and they're holding something. Could be a paintbrush, could be something else. What do you think? What does that tell us about what the artist is doing? Well, I think it's interesting that the person who painted the painting we're looking at, not the painting that the artist is creating inside of this painting, chose to show the artist when they're not actually in the act of painting. If their hands are in their lap, they're just kind of looking at their artwork, kind of observing their progress, maybe. If you've ever painted or drawn something or done really anything creative at all, there's probably a point where you took a moment to just kind of step back and look at what you're doing. And to me, that's what the artist looks like they're doing right here. They're kind of doing the same thing that we're doing. They're just taking a moment to step back, look at their artwork, notice whatever details they think are working well, what needs to be adjusted, maybe planning their next steps. They're just looking at art, just like you and me. And there's another kind of sense of mystery here, right? We don't get to see what they're looking at. We don't get to see the work of art that they've created. What do you think it might look like? What's on the other side of this canvas? We talked about the figure in the corner, and maybe they're painting that person. What do you think? What do you think their painting looks like? Are there particular colors that come to mind when you imagine it? Do you imagine a particular kind of figure in the painting? Or maybe what the rest of the room might look like? Do you think of a particular sense of light? When you kind of just close your eyes and imagine what this artist is creating, what do you see? It's kind of fun to attune to these details of what we can't see in a painting. It lets us fill in the blank. So when you think about what you can't see here, what do you fill in the blank with? Really, you have the freedom to fill it in with anything you want. Well, I think that might be kind of an interesting note to stop on. Just imagining what this artist is creating behind his easel. We can imagine that there's another easel set up right where our perspective of the room is. That another artist, the person that created this, is painting from. This person is painting perhaps a figure in the corner, and then someone else who created the work of art that we're looking at is painting him. So there's all sorts of interesting relationships between people creating art and the people looking at it, like you and me. Maybe we can kind of participate in creating this artwork too, just by looking at it and imagining what might be going on. So as we consider that last thought, I just want to tell you a little bit about this painting. It's by Charles J. Fiscus. He's an American painter who lived from 1861 to 1884. Painting is called Artist in His Studio. It was done between 1875 and 1885. It's watercolor on paper, and it's about 10 1/8 inch by 13 7/8 inch. So it's a pretty small painting, but as we looked at it, I'm sure you noticed, despite its size, there's quite a lot to look at here. So now that we know a little bit about this work of art, I wonder if there is anything new that makes you notice about the painting. It's always interesting to learn a little bit of information about an artwork at the end and just see if that brings up any new thoughts for you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this work of art. I want to thank you so much for spending the time with me today to look at this artwork together. I really hope you enjoyed looking at this together with me. I want to thank the Eskenazi Museum of Art so much for having us to look at their collection, both in the live program on Zoom and in the video that you're watching right now. I especially want to thank Jean Graves, who is the Chair of Education at the museum, for making this program possible. thanks so much to Jean for everything that she did to help facilitate this program. So, thanks so much for joining me today at the Eskenazi Museum. I'm Shane Farrell, the Director of Programs at ARTZ Philadelphia, and this was another episode of ARTFul Insights.